Hi, this is Travis Chisholm. I'm going to be talking about the 12-minute Cooper test and offering some helpful suggestions on how to perform the assessment. First and foremost, what is the Cooper test? The Cooper test is a field assessment utilized to estimate a participant's maximal oxygen uptake, or VO2 max. Typically, VO2 max is assessed utilizing a laboratory and very expensive equipment, and as a sport coach or as a strength and conditioning professional, we may not have access to that kind of equipment. And so we need some sort of assessment that's going to be both valid and reliable that can be utilized to estimate a participant's VO2 max. Cooper test is proven to be both valid and reliable for both male and female athletes, and for adults and for children. So it's overall a very useful assessment to estimate VO2 max. Typically, it is performed on a 400-meter track, or you can do it on a flat surface. If you're going to use it on a flat surface, make sure you have something to measure so you know how far the athlete travels within the 12 minutes. When you're ready to begin the assessment, first and foremost, have the athlete perform some kind of standardized warm-up. You want to standardize it so it's the same warm-up every single time the assessment is performed. So that's one thing that we can control within the environment. After the standardized warm-up, you'll have the athlete line up on the line. On the cue of the tester will begin the stopwatch. The athlete will begin running. The athlete is encouraged to run as far and as fast as possible within the 12 minutes. Typically, it's best to do this around a track so it's easy to track the distance. But again, if you're going to use a flat surface, just make sure that you have something to measure the distance traveled. Once the test has been done, obviously the 12 minutes are finished, the athlete stops, you calculate the distance, and then we can use that to estimate the athlete's the VO2 max of that athlete. One other thing that we want to do to try to, again, control the environment as much as possible is if you are going to offer vocal encouragement to the athlete, I would encourage you to script that. I would encourage you to plan out what you're going to say and when you are going to say it and how you're going to say it. We want to try to, if you're going to offer verbal encouragement for one athlete but not another, that could cause the test to become unreliable. And so that's one thing we want to try to make sure that we control as much as possible. I recommend scripting it so that way every single time, no matter who's doing the test, when the test is occurring, that same vocal encouragement can happen to those athletes every single time in order to continue to make sure the test remains reliable. When is the best time to use this? I recommend utilizing this test during the preseason of an aerobic-based sport. So cross-country runners, the preseason of track and field for middle and long-distance runners, for soccer athletes, or any other aerobic-based athlete. And we want to know what their VO2 max is going into the season. The Cooper test can be very useful in helping determine training paces and whatnot. As a cross-country coach, I like to know what my athlete's VO2 max is so I can then help better understand what kind of aerobic pace they should be running, how fast they should be running their workouts, and so I like to know their VO2 max, and so I like to use the Cooper test in order to calculate that. Another thing that can also another time to utilize the Cooper test would be, we also know that it actually is kind of a valid predictor of half marathon running time for recreational athletes. So if you have a recreational athlete you're training, and you want to kind of get an estimate of how they might perform on the half marathon, you can have them perform the Cooper test, and it actually has proven to be very reliable, more so than actually a laboratory test at predicting half marathon performance. Some alternatives, because the Cooper test isn't for everyone. We also know that with the Cooper test, the 1.5 mile or 2,400 meter run is also equally as valid and reliable at estimating VO2 max. So if you want to just run a distance rather than a time, the 1.5 mile run test is also very valid and very useful. We do know, however, that both the 1.5 and the Cooper test tend to be more reliable and more valid for children than for adults. So if you're working with children, if you're working with middle school or high school athletes, I recommend that you use the Cooper test or the 1.5 mile run test because those are very useful, valid for that population. While yes, they are valid and reliable for adults, it does tend to misestimate their VO2 max. And so in fact, what we actually know is that the 20-meter shuttle run is actually better at predicting adult VO2 max than the Cooper test. And so depending upon the age of your client, if they are a middle school, high school athlete, Cooper test, 1.5 mile run. If they are an older college age or older athlete, I would recommend doing the 20-meter shuttle run or the pacer test as probably a better suited for that kind of athlete. Finally, some possible errors that we want to try to avoid. So we want to try to control the test as much as possible so that way we know that the VO2 max is the athlete's VO2 max. One disadvantage that the Cooper test has compared to the standard laboratory assessment is, again, the weather. The Cooper test is designed to be run outdoors, whereas the typical laboratory VO2 max assessment is going to, again, be working in a laboratory where we can easily control all environmental factors, whereas the Cooper test being run outdoors, the heat and the humidity can play a major role. So if you're going to do the Cooper test and you're going to do it outdoors, I highly encourage you to make sure you do it probably in the morning. Make sure humidity is low and make sure the temperature is going to be a little bit lower. That way the test can remain reliable. One thing that you might try to do is if you have access to an indoor track, doing the Cooper test on an indoor track. So again, you can control that environmental factor. But again, if you're going to do it on a not a track and you're doing it on a course and you have some kind of hills or something in there, that'll also make the test unreliable. And so making sure that the course is flat, either the temperature is low, the humidity is low, or to perform the test on an indoor track so that you can control that environment. Another important one to consider is the training status of the athlete. Younger athletes, novice athletes, are going to tend to lack internal motivation, and so a Cooper test that is 12 minutes long, they may not be able to be motivated to complete the test the way it's supposed to be done. Whereas an older athlete that is more internally motivated may be a better fit for the Cooper test because they are going to run the test the way it's designed. So again, if you're working with older athletes, college age and above, maybe not using the Cooper test, maybe trying the 20-meter shuttle run. If you're working with a athlete that is very internally motivated and is a middle school, high school athlete, then maybe the Cooper test would probably be a good fit for you. Hope this is helpful to you and have a wonderful day. Take care.